Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Marchuk. Welcome to the Transform Now podcast. In this episode, we'll be chatting with Tara May, who's the CEO of Aspiritech. Now, Aspiritech is a QA testing company that empowers individuals on the autism spectrum to fulfill their potential through meaningful employment combined with social opportunity. And I suspect that's probably your secret sauce, too, as you compete in the market. So welcome, Tara.
Thank you for having me.
I'm really glad that you're here. So this is a slight divergence from what we normally talk about, which is a lot more AI and automation and stuff like that. But this has a lot to do with that because you're a technology company. But before we get into all of that, I want to give you the opportunity to introduce yourself. And then also if you could maybe describe what neurodiversity is, because I think that's something that everyone needs to understand.
Absolutely. So you did a fantastic job introducing me and the organization I lead. I like to say that Aspiritech is a company that's built for, but also by autistic adults at every level of the organization, from entry level, day one, learning the tech skills, all the way up to 80% of our executive leadership team is autistic. So it's a really unique organization, but it's also a tech company doing incredible tech services day in and day out. We just happen to be really conscientious about neurodiversity. So what is that weirdo word that you may or may have never heard before in your life? I love that you set us up to introduce the concept, right? I had never heard the word neurodiversity, nor did I have anyone in my life who was autistic until my son's diagnosis when he was 5. He's now 14. And I sort of fell in love with the concept because it's a really cool concept, right? It's this idea that all of us, 100% of us, have really unique, really complicated brains that experience that impact the way we experience the world every single day. 86 billion neurons firing in each of us that impact the way we learn, the way we socialize, who we fall in love with, how we move, absolutely everything. And neurodiversity really puts us into two different camps. There's about 80% of us that are roughly neurotypical. Our brains work close to proximity of the way other people's brains works. And then there's about 20% of us that fall under the camp of neurodivergent, meaning their brains work so far outside the box, we put a name on it, a label on it, a diagnosis, like autism, like OCD, like Tourette's, like ADHD. And so understanding and empathizing with neurodiversity means understanding and empathizing with all the people around us.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for going through that. So going into your model of employment, just for a little bit more, why is it important, the whole model of employing neurodiverse individuals as we're moving into this whole new world of AI? And in what ways could these neurodiverse individuals have unique strengths or perspectives that would be particularly valuable as we're going into the AI and automation world?
So the importance first starts almost always with a problem, right? So here in the US, the unemployment or underemployment rate for autistic adults is about 80%. So just way too high. And the first thing Aspiritech did was set out to solve that problem. But the solution is actually where you get into really fascinating and incredible innovation, because autistic people often struggle with employment, not because they're not incredibly intelligent, creative problem solvers, and amazing employees. It's because they struggle with that first hurdle, the interview which tests our social skills and our ability to make eye contact and navigate new situations, are all things that autistic people universally struggle with, right? And so it is so imperative for us to move beyond that first step of the traditional interview process and understand what autistic people are actually capable of in the workplace. And that's where it gets really exciting, right? Especially around AI and large language model building, which our team excels at, right? So when you think about the autistic brain, You have people who solve problems 40% faster than neurotypical brains. You have people that when paired with a task that they're good at can be 150% more productive. You have these brains that are amazing at spotting patterns and anomalies from patterns, which is a great match for AI, data projects, cybersecurity, looking out for threats and hackers, right? It's just an incredible match in the tech field and in creative fields to have these brains that don't experience the world the way everybody else does. So valuable in the workplace.
That's interesting. So to start with, Aspiritech is a technology company, and you have a bunch of different services that cater to a wide range of firms. So give us some example of how some of the firms that you work with have experienced benefit from the special folks that you've got working.
I could talk about this all the day. I won't.
Oh, we don't have that long.
I won't. Give you two really great examples, okay? So one is one of our largest customers is Bose. So Bose headphones and speakers, before they hit the consumer market, are tested by Aspiritech autistic adults. Now, think for a second about sound sensitivity that often comes with autism. That makes auditory and audio testing a really good match for our team. User testing in general, our VP of operations, Maxwell, is autistic, and he often says, when you move through a world where you're noticing all these problems, you want to create the best user experience possible in products. Our team is excellent at that. I'll give you one more example, AI related. We did a massive project with the TSA, data annotating images, about 280,000 images that are the foundation for the large language model that is automating security at airports. Well, our team members were able to move through that project with more speed and more accuracy than people who had been doing it for a decade. So those are two really fun examples of how the autistic brain and its uniqueness is actually an incredible asset for many projects.
So you mentioned the large language model component of it and the data tagging piece, because that's a huge part of it, right? Beyond some of the visual aspects of maybe the TCA, which is a great example, honestly, that's a fantastic example because it's really important to be able to do that. And given the fact that oftentimes data tagging is not necessarily the most engaging type of work for maybe neurotypical folks, because our brains will, I'll just speak for myself, I will drift off 15 to other things to think of other things. But do you see this as an advantage for folks who have this neurodiverse kind of viewpoint of the world to be able to take on these very detailed, sensitive type of tasks in a more effective way?
Absolutely. And what I often say is that autistic people are humans, right? And so within humans, we're all different. We all have our different strengths, weaknesses, preferences. But magic happens when you can take the talent someone has and pair it with a business need. And that is exactly our model, to take our incredibly talented, motivated, hardworking people who can focus on certain things and pair them with a business need. And we do that, when it comes to working with insurance clients on complex actuaries, right? We do it in several different AI and large language model building projects, which often I get asked, they're like, oh, isn't AI going to ruin all the manual tasks your team does? I'm like, heck no, it's created a million more, right? This is something that we get asked about on a regular basis, and we get great work doing. So it's just about taking the strengths of a team member, pairing it with a business need, and watching productivity in spades.
What's interesting is you mentioned this, and I think this is probably the key point. The strengths that some of these neurodiverse folks have may not necessarily be apparent, certainly through the traditional interviewing or discussion processes that you may have for neurotypical folks going through an interview to get into an AI position or to into any of these technical fields. So how does your team see past that to put all those dots together? Because it doesn't seem like, just in general, I'm certainly generalizing this, that an organization like an insurance company or a bank or any large, standard kind of organization would have the capabilities or the thought processes to put all those dots together, saying, we need somebody who's extremely detail oriented in this spot here, and we're willing to go to the lengths that we need to find the right person for that job, versus we have a job that's open and we've interviewed a bunch of candidates. This one here has this type of experience doing something in the past. They'll fit well enough. You guys are actually tailoring these experiences that the folks you have can really thrive in, but you've made a way to connect all the dots. How does another organization, or how could another organization make those translations to say, this is the kind of person we need?
The most important thing organizations can do is look at the job that needs to be done and understand, how do you suss that out in the interview process. So I just spoke to a panel of CEOs, and what I shared with them was, I had one of them stand up and I said, okay, tell me what you're looking for in a great candidate when they come in to interview you. And of course, he stuck his hand out and shook it very firmly, and he made great eye contact with me and started telling me how great he was. And I said, okay, what does that have to do with being an engineer, which is the job he was hiring for, and lamenting not having enough good candidates for? And to me, it's that juxtaposition, right? If you're hiring a salesperson, then their charisma, their eye contact, their handshaking, that matters, right? If you are hiring an engineer who's going to sit at a desk coding or automating for 8 hours a day, it matters a lot less, right? And so what I encourage organizations to do is look at the job they need done and look at the candidate's abilities to do the job rather than to sell themselves on it. And that in and of itself, that mindset shift can go a really long way.
So the way you said that too, let's get back to the neurotypical folks. I would consider myself generally neurotypical, although I'm sure many people would say I'm a weirdo. But the reality is the concepts and how I look at things and how I approach things would be neurotypical. So I am making assumptions along the way that we go. So when I make assumptions for a job role, for you, like you said, for this or some other way, I may have in mind, say, that does sound like somebody we would fit really well here. How would I, as a neurotypical person, design an interview process that could identify that right candidate, though, coming through my neurotypical viewpoint, so that I can see that quality in a neurodiverse person?
So a couple of examples of things that we suggest for this, which is a great question, Michael. One is allow for some sort of way for the person to showcase their skills that isn't just talking about it. Sometimes a tour is a great way to do it, because an autistic person might not answer the question in a sitting setting, but they may notice 7 things on the tour that all of a sudden spark how good they're going to be at this job, right? And I've seen that happen in real time. Another is submitting a work sample, if that's possible, right? A data project you've worked on where you can go, holy crap, this person is going to be able to work magic, right, in building this large language model, even though they don't really want to talk to me about the weather in our interview, right? So those are a couple of examples. Another is, this is something we do at Aspiritech. We give the interview questions in advance so the person can put a little thought into answering them, perhaps write them down, because everyone has different processing speeds. Well, sometimes a slower, more thoughtful processing speed is great for actual complex work, doesn't showcase so well at an interview, right? And it was funny, when we started doing this, our neurotypical candidates were the ones who were the most grateful. They were like, no one's ever given me the job questions in advance. This was so wonderful, right? So sometimes it's just the little things that can make the biggest difference.
Yeah, that makes sense. I can see too, when you start talking about engaging folks in the process beforehand, before they're even as part of the organization, you can now make them feel a little more at ease, which would, I think, for every candidate would be a great thing, right? To have that kind of experience. Okay, we'll go to the next stage. We found somebody, and this neurodiverse person is the right person. We've identified and we've hired them, and everybody's excited about they start their role. Now, in any role, especially within, I've managed software developers for a long time, and I understand the breadth of their viewpoints on things. Some of them are extremely introverted. They're neurotypical, but they're very introverted people, while others are extremely outgoing and flamboyant. Neurotypical, but on the other end of that particular spectrum. So when you bring someone who is neurodiverse into that environment, how would a manager or someone understand how best to interact with or relate to that particular individual in the roles that they're in, with the understanding that we're still a team as part of this broader organization?
Absolutely. So the response I'm going to give you, Michael, is the same response I would give for managers of neurotypical people as well as neurodivergent people, which is just simply ask, what do you need to be your best self in the workplace? How do you prefer your one-on-ones to be structured? How do you like your direction? How do you like your projects? Do you like them chunked out, or do you want me to give you a goal and let you fly with it, right? What sort of manager style is going to support you the best, right? We have this amazing questionnaire. We share it with organizations, and they often find themselves implementing it almost immediately because they absolutely love it, which is just a way to get to know your employees and how they're going to work best. Doing this is great for neurotypical people. It is necessary for autistic people, right? So that these preferences all of a sudden become barriers rather than just preferences. And just getting to know your people and what their needs are is so valuable. The return on that is infinite.
Interesting perspective. So, in an environment where this is all ever changing, right? AI is not standing still. Technology doesn't stand still. How are you broadening out your employees' viewpoints as growing them in the various technologies that are emerging every day with the loads that they're carrying currently?
Yeah. So this job actually goes back about 30 years for me at this point. So I've been in digital transformation since the aughts, and I worked in journalism, and what I would come in and help newspapers and legacy print publications do is become...
I've heard about those things. There's newspaper things I've heard about.
It's going back a long time, right? Turn this legacy print organization, right, into a thriving digital organization. And that sort of transformation, which now is happening on a monthly basis, right, to me is about a few things. It is about creating a culture of constant innovation. And one of the things you need in a culture of constant innovation is psychological safety to fail, because you're going to screw up a million times when you're moving at that pace and you're learning and evolving. It's also hiring learners, right? Because the skill set you hire for today might be completely different than the skill set you need in 6 months. So I want to look for learners. It's one of the reasons I love working with autistic people. Autistic people are learners. They constantly want to be bettering themselves and upskilling, right? Giving the resources to learn and upskill. You can't just say to your team members, well, learn new things. Well, that requires access to continuing education, to new tools, to professional speakers, right? So to me, it's about creating this culture where your team members have the permission to move forward, to move at the pace of AI and digital, and the resources and tools to do so. And also the safety net that when it doesn't go perfectly, which it won't, that rather than a culture of blame, it's going to be one of, let's pick it up, let's try it again. And I think those things are so important at every organization.
I would agree. What was the biggest challenge you identified working with neurotypical people that is different now working with neurodivergent people?
Oh man, that culture of gratitude, right? I mean, autistic people have spent so much of their lives hearing about themselves from a deficit perspective, right? Whether it's school, well-meaning loved ones, therapists, whatever, it's what's wrong with you and how are we going to fix it? And to be in a workplace that accepts them exactly as they are, accepts the value, embraces the value, sees the value, it just creates this culture of gratitude and lifting each other up that allows space for innovation and trying new things and transformation at an incredible pace. And we bring that into our clients' perspectives as well. And I think it's why we have a 9.3 net promoter score, right? We're awesome to work with.
That's very cool. And I appreciate you bringing that up. So listen, Tara, I appreciate you being with us today. This is something that, again, is a new concept for quite a few people. And I wanted to make sure that we brought it out in the context of, hey, AI and the technology field is not just for neurotypical people. There may be some real stars out there that you may be overlooking because you're not factoring in this amazing talent pool of neurodiverse people. So I'm glad that you're able to join us today and talk more about that.
Thank you so much for having me. It has been a pleasure. And, just think AI is built on human intelligence, and human intelligence means all sorts of kinds of brains.
That's right. Okay, thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.